The mystical truths in religions East and West are brought to light again and made relevant for our time by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, world-renowned author and spiritual teacher.
We've barely touched on the subject of Morya. Can you tell us a bit more about him?
Morya is probably one of the great saints of the Church in his devotion to Jesus Christ. And yet he was embodied as Akbar the Great, the master who founded the Mughal Empire in India and was the greatest of all its rulers. His policies were considered to be among the most enlightened of his time. He was a superb organizer and administrator of conquered territories. He introduced many reforms, put an end to extortion, increased trade, and showed tolerance toward the many religious faiths of India. We see here then the weaving in and out of the soul of a great devotee of God in the paths of East and West. And we take special note that in each of his incarnations he is perfecting the diamond of the will of God within his soul, through God government, through the vision of community which he wrote in his Utopia as Thomas More, in his devotion to the will of God before man, in both incarnations as Thomas à Becket and as Thomas More. Coming even to the birth of Christ as Melchior was the fulfillment of his longing to serve that will. Finally, he was known and loved as the Irish poet Thomas More. Among his many ballads, the best remembered is Believe Me, If All Those Endearing Young Charms. The tenderness of the works of Thomas More show the heart of one devoted to the will of God. The intense love that must be the other side of this fiery devotion and authority of the first ray man or woman. We find then that those who are the ones who have the greatest power of God as rulers have in their souls the gift of poetry and the flow of love as a sweet balance to their immense power. In his final embodiment, Morya was in India. In the latter part of the 19th century, he was born a Rajput prince. Known as Al Morya Khan, he worked closely with Kuthumi, Dwal Kul, and he attempted to acquaint the West with the reality of the invisible world and the teachings of the law and hierarchy through the theosophical movement. He was known as the Master M, and Kuthumi was known as the Master KH or Kuthumi. Since his ascension in about 1898, Al Morya has worked tirelessly with Saint Germain in the cause of world and individual freedom. To that end, he has given many dictations and many lectures on the true teachings of the Christ and what they mean for us in this age. Among these is his book, The Chila and the Path, which can be secured by our listeners by a phone call or writing to us. In this book, he writes, "Until men recognize the darkness, they do not reach for the light. Thus the grossness of materialism and of a mechanistic civilization continues unchallenged. To challenge, men must have a sword, and the sword is the sacred word of truth to this age. The Darjeeling Council is a unit of hierarchy. I am its chief. Numbered among those who deliberate in our chambers are Saint Germain, Mary the Mother, Jesus the Christ, the Master Kuthumi, Chananda, the great divine director, Lord Maitreya, and the ascended Master Godfrey. Assisted by many unascended chelas, we serve the cause of the will of God among humanity, in the governments of the nations, in the economic councils, in the social strata, in the institutions of learning, and above all in the diamond hearts of the devotees." Al Morya is explaining here the interaction of hierarchy. Hierarchy is simply the succession of masters and their disciples which exists and has always existed in the very scheme of things as souls have made their way Godward. There are in this hierarchy then ascended masters, those who have become one with God through the acceleration of consciousness, and then there are their disciples who yet remain in embodiment, people like you and me, who are called chelas, from the Sanskrit chita. Chela means servant or disciple. We as the disciples of the masters interact with the masters to work for the cause of light and freedom on earth. In the Darjeeling Council chambers, which are located in the Temple of God's Will in Darjeeling, Chelas may journey out of the body in the etheric sheath or the etheric vehicle. And so while we sleep at night, our souls take leave, and we do go to the retreats of the brotherhood that are most fitted to our soul evolution. Therefore, we may have a recollection when we awaken in the morning of being among these great teachers, our elder brothers and sisters on the path who are showing us the way. Morya, who is greatly concerned about the condition of government and freedom on earth, came forth to train Mark Prophet as his messenger, and then he appeared to me in Boston and called me to be a messenger also. And so he writes of this experience in his book. He says, "Those who see the crumbling of the old order look for the new. The path of Chelaship, or discipleship, is the way of transition. For those who would arrive at the station of the new cycle, we provide answers and a formula, and there is no turning back. In those in whom selfishness has not marred the vision of the new day, there is the burning desire to be free and to make that freedom available to all. Such was the purpose of the Darjeeling Council in the founding of the Summit Lighthouse in Washington, D.C. in 1958. With humble beginnings, yet with the torch of our trust passed from God and anchored in the heart of a band of devotees, we built our organization, an outer arm of the Great White Brotherhood, a forum for the will of God, a focus for the purity of its fiery core. I should explain that the Great White Brotherhood is that order of ascended masters that has existed for thousands upon thousands of years, and it is the association of ascended masters and their embodied chelas. The term white refers to the white light of the aura in all of those who are its members. It is the crystallization of the Christ consciousness, the halo of the saints. We find then that it is no reference to race whatsoever, and that whether black or white, or Eastern or Western, Chinese or Indian, all can be and all indeed are a part of the Great White Brotherhood who have made their calling and election sure. Morya writes, Mark Prophet and later his twin flame Elizabeth was trained by me to be a messenger for that hierarchy of adepts, composed of all who have graduated from Earth's schoolroom with honor. These are they who have mastered the laws of their own karma, and by the pursuit of the Buddhic light have been thrust from the wheel of rebirth. These are the ascended ones whose souls have been lifted into the glory of the life, universal and triumphant. By their striving on the way, by their excellence in self-discipline, and by the grace of Christ, they are the overcomers."
Does Morya have anything to say about the way government is being handled today?
Morya is very concerned with government on earth, and he will work with and inspire all who are likewise concerned. Of course, he believes in government of the people, by the people, and for the people, but he tells us that those who have the right to rule are those who have exalted the threefold flame in the heart. Those who have the greatest amount of attainment in the Christ consciousness are those who have the authority of the Christ. It is the coming of the reign of the Prince of Peace for which Morya is preparing us, and this reign he explains to be the advent of the second coming of Jesus Christ, which is the kindling of our own self-awareness in that Christ and our oneness in the service with Jesus. And therefore the reign of the Prince of Peace is the reign through the rule of those who have the light in the heart, no matter what their religion or following. They may be Buddhists, they may be Jews, they may be Muslims, but it is because they are dedicated to the light and the flame of God that gives them that essential ability to rule others who are working toward that very same discipline.
The ideal that you describe seems very far removed from the reality that we know, Mother. Are there practical steps that can get us from here to there?
The practical step is always the establishing of the self within the altar of being, within the consciousness of God. It is always the first step. Without God, we can do nothing, as Jesus taught us. I of mine own self can do nothing. It is the Father in me who doeth the work. This work of God through us is the only way we can deliver our nation and every nation into the hand of God. Morya has written a white paper from the Darjeeling Council table in which he discusses his views on politics, right and left wing. His opening statement is one that I have cherished ever since he wrote it. He says, "The orphans of the Spirit are our concern, those who without the thread of contact with deity remain wedded to an unwholesome environment, those to whom the real purpose of life is never revealed. For the crystallization of their intellectual concepts and the hardness of their hearts, rooted in selfishness, do not open the cosmic doorway to our domain." Morya and the Darjeeling Council provide us with the opportunity for conscious cooperation with the hosts of heaven, so that we might lead our nation, our life, our community into God dominion, into the dominion, the true dominion of the sons and daughters of God. This is what the coming revolution is all about.
Sounds like they've got something in mind for all of us.
That's right, and it is direct participation in higher consciousness that will truly revolutionize America and every nation.
This is a presentation of the Summit Lighthouse, an international spiritual organization dedicated to universal enlightenment. Founded in 1958, the Summit Lighthouse is a beacon of truth to thousands worldwide and a leader in New Thought spirituality.